Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So we have a couple of questions at hand. Number one, what are the characteristics of life? As in, what does it take to make something a living thing? And number two, does fire fit those characteristics, and can we consider it a living thing? So to answer this question, we're going to go through some of the things that you may have posted on your discussion. So one of the first things that you may have thought about was that organisms have to come from other organisms. They don't just poof into existence, and we call that reproduction. So all organisms have to be able to do this. And this candle, can fire in fact reproduce? Well, let's find out. I have one little fire, and very quickly I can have two little fires. And a not so fun fact for you is that forest fires can actually spread 2 miles from their source with a single ember blowing in the wind. So it's very important that we put out campfires and bonfires because no one wants to have a forest fire running around. Now, another characteristic that you may have thought about was that organisms have to be able to breathe. And so we call that exchanging gases. Yeah, I know that's getting harder and harder to do today, it seems like. But exchanging gases is very important. You and I breathe in oxygen, break down our food called glucose, and breathe out carbon dioxide. Photosynthetic organisms do the opposite of this. They take in carbon dioxide to produce that glucose and then release oxygen as a byproduct. So being clear though, all photosynthetic organisms make that food for themselves to break down during cellular respiration, which is what animals like you and I are doing. Now, can our fire exchange gases with its environment? Well, this fire is doing something very similar to cellular respiration. It's taking in oxygen, using that to consume this wax and release carbon dioxide. And you can see if we cut this fire off from oxygen, it goes out. So must be able to exchange gases with the environment. And going off of this, maybe you thought about consumption. Maybe you thought about organisms having to be able to eat things in their environment. And it does not matter what kind of organism that you are, you have to be able to take in some kind of nutrients. Plants do this through their roots and leaves. Fungi do this outside of their bodies, and they bring that nutrient back in. We actually, as animals, consume materials and eat them. Now, can fire consume materials? Well, we already saw just a minute ago, we talked about how this fire is taking in the wax, and over time, this candle is going to get lower and lower as that wax is consumed. So far, our fire fits 3 of the characteristics of life. All of them so far fire has. So yet another characteristic of life maybe you thought about was, where does this material go? And so that consumed material goes into helping this organism to grow. So can fire in fact grow? Well, let's find out. So if I take a little piece of paper and I feed it to my fire here, can it grow? Well, absolutely. And we can see that as this fire grows, it's also producing some ash. Okay? And so there is waste that is produced by organisms, and we call that excretion. We have to be able to get rid of that waste. Otherwise, we're going to be poisoned by that waste staying inside of our bodies. So excretion is very important. Does fire excrete? Well, we just saw that as it consumes material, it produces ash. So yes, fire can excrete materials. Now, yet another characteristic of life, and there are 8 that we're looking for, is that organisms have to be able to move. They got to be able to get around in their environment. And I know some of you are probably thinking, well, trees don't move. Do they not, though? When you think about it, trees have to be able to blow around in the wind. If they're perfectly sturdy and they're not going to give, the first strong windstorm is going to knock that tree over and it's going to die. So movement is also very important for living things. And not only movement of the organism itself, but movement of the offspring and getting those offspring distributed to other areas. Does fire fit this characteristic? Well, as you can see, if I blow on this fire a little, it dances around. So yes, fire can absolutely move in its environment. Yet another characteristic, as you just saw, oops, that should be 7. As you just saw, I was able to blow on this fire and it moved around. So that is a response to something happening in the environment. So we call that respond to stimuli. And All organisms have to be able to respond to things going on in their environment. Think about if you were in a dark room and someone turns on your light, maybe when you first wake up in the morning, and it hurts your eyes because your eyes are wide and they're taking in all that light. And when all that light comes into your eyes, it kind of hurts a little bit until your eyes can constrict. And that is not something you have to think about. You just respond to that. Your body just does it for you. So there are many different kinds of responses. For example, if I say your name, you're probably going to say what? That's a response to a stimulus in your environment. So this goes to behavior. And did we see that fire can respond to its environment? Well, yes. If it gets some air, it's going to move around and definitely does respond to its environment. So far, fire fits 7 of our 8 characteristics. So what is the 8th characteristic of life? All life forms have to be made of cells. We have to have this separation from the environment in order to be considered a living thing. If there is no separation from the environment, then the inside of the cell would be equal to its environment. That's dead. That's not alive. So you have to be able to have this separation where chemical reactions can happen. You can build up materials in this boundary of this cell. So organisms, you have to be able to look at an organism's tissue under a microscope and see cells. But can I do that with fire? I can't really slice this fire up and put it on a slide and put it under a microscope. It does not have cells, and therefore fire does not fit that 8th characteristic of life. So what does that mean? Is fire alive or is it not? I mean, it fits 7 of these 8 characteristics, but the trick is, for something to be considered alive, it must fit all 8 of these characteristics. And fire does not fit that last characteristic of cells, and this is, I'm sure is not surprising to you. Fire is not considered a living thing for that reason. So I have left on your discussion post a little assignment for you. I want you to talk about these 8 characteristics of life. What are they? And then I want you to find an organism and tell me how it fits 4 of these 8 characteristics of life. You do not have to talk about all 8, but do be aware that for something to be alive, it must fit all 8 characteristics. I don't care if you look at a bacteria, a redwood tree, a blue whale, it doesn't matter to me. I did give you an example on your discussion page. I looked at red clover, and I talked about some specifics about that organism. I'm not asking that you go overboard with your research, and I have given you some guiding questions to help you on the discussion board, but I do look forward to seeing what you guys end up posting about. It's always fun to learn new things about organisms. So I hope you enjoyed this and learned something about life, and I look forward to hearing from you.